Hi everyone, this is aTension doing my first ever tutorial. In this tutorial I'll show you how to make a realistic drum kit in FL Studio 20 using a drum library from Impact Studios and the FPC. Impact Studios is a Swedish-based studio who provide a multitude of metal-focused sample libraries, VSTs and other services like mixing and mastering. To learn more, go over to their website at impactstudios.com. This video will be a tutorial of how you use Impact Drums 1 without Kontakt, but with FL Studio's own plugin called FPC or Fruity Pad Controller. Impact Drums 1 and other similar products most often come with an NKI file. This file is something called a library, which is used together with Kontakt or Kontakt Player to load said instrument. The libraries are samples from the original recorder, in this instance it's Impact Studios, which are then ordered to play softer recordings with a softer velocity and vice versa. If you don't have Kontakt, how do you use this awesome library that you just acquired? Well, that's what I'm gonna go through on FL Studio 20 this tutorial. All editions of FL Studio come with the FPC, which is a multi-layer velocity drum machine. This means that you can load the FPC with different samples and decide at what velocities the samples are played. You can follow along with me if you have your own library to work with. So, after you downloaded a library, just extract it to whatever hard drive you seem fit. I would recommend that you have the files on an SSD for faster loading times, but it's not necessary for this to work. I currently have it in my mechanical drive to conserve space. Please choose your location carefully. Since we have to link the samples to FL Studio, I wouldn't recommend moving the folder after the upcoming steps. When you have located your folder, please open up FL Studio. Then we'll load the FPC plugin. When you open up FPC, you'll have a preloaded drum kit provided by ImageLine. This drum kit consists of lower quality samples which are not up to par with what we need, so we're gonna make our own drum kit using Impact Drums 1. If you right click on the arrows in the top right corner of the plugin, it'll show you a bunch of presets. Here you can either choose to start from an empty template that looks like this. As we suspect, it's completely empty. I would not recommend starting with this, since we don't have a clear idea of where we should place the different samples to correspond correctly on the piano roll. So I'll start with the default template instead. Here we have corresponding pads already laid out for us, so we have an idea of where to place our new samples. We need to empty the pads of this preset. This will not do anything to our current preset unless we save over it, so don't worry about that. After we've emptied it all out, we can go back to our library folder and start searching for the samples we need. If we go into the resource and then samples folder, we'll see the choice of either processed or raw. Inside the raw folder, we've been provided with the unedited audio samples directly as it's recorded at Impact Studios. Processed, as it can be heard in the name, are processed audio samples with some EQ compression and so on. I'll pick samples from the processed folder now, but you can pick and choose as you like, of course. Inside here we can see a multitude of different folders, each containing WAV files. Impact Drums 1 have a variety of snare drums combined with a kick, rack tom and a floor tom. Let's start with the kick. Inside the kick folder there are two more folders, Close and Room. Close contains the direct recorded audio of the kick drum, which is also known as a dry sample. And Room contains samples of the reverberation of the room they recorded in. So, if we were to play the Close and Room samples together, we would get some room together with our new sound. I'm used to creating my own room inside FL Studio, so I'll just use the Close samples for this tutorial. Here we have all the samples recorded for the kick, from soft to medium to hard. As we can see, there are a lot of them, and I'll show you why when we have loaded them into our FPC, which we should do now. Before you begin loading in your samples, you should make sure that you're on the right pad on the FPC. So go back to FL Studio and please make sure you're on the kick drum pad before we start. To load our FPC with the new samples, just open FL Studio in the background and have your folder on top and drag and drop the samples into the middle box. We begin with loading the samples labeled soft first, then medium and lastly hard. After we've finished loading all the samples in the correct order and we try our new kick, it sounds like this. Not that great. This is because no matter the velocity, it always plays the samples at once. This is not what we want, but fortunately the FPC can fix this for us. In the top middle part of the FPC, you'll have a button called Spread Even. This divides all the samples up to corresponding velocities and volumes. So after we push this button, we have a more natural division of our samples. This, however, means that when we play the highest velocity sample, FPC only has one file to play. This is fixed on Contact and other plugins by having something called round robin. This switches between different samples to make it feel more natural. Every sample we have loaded has now gotten a corresponding velocity after we've pushed Spread Even. To achieve the round robin effect, push the small button in the top right corner of the FPC. What this does is that it activates the round robin function for samples with the same velocity. I'll show you how this works. Just drag the scroll layers for the velocities to match some samples. I'll do 3 or 2. If you're having trouble visually locating where to have the start and end of the layer, look in the hint panel in the top left corner of FL Studio when hovering the scroll layer. So, here's how it sounds for the strongest velocity now that we've used the round robin feature. I think it feels much more natural, and we could be done here if we want. Although, I want the entire spectrum to sound natural, so I'll continue and do this step for almost all samples. After this is done, we now have 2 or 3 samples divided on each velocity. This makes it feel even more realistic, which is what we're after. Here's what it sounds like now. After this step, we can now go back to our samples folder and do the same thing for a snare drum. This might feel like a lot of work, but I feel like it's worth it, and you only have to do it once for each library. So, this also has a room sound, which I'll ignore, and I'll go into the dry sound and do the exact same thing. This time though, we also have ghost samples, which are even softer than soft, so we'll drag them in first and then continue as before. I've already done this for a kick, 2 snares and the rack and floor tom, and here is my result. Apparently I've made the kick very short, so I'll turn that off. Sounds really nice, don't you think? Another great feature in the FPC is the ability to split different pads to different mixer channels. Here you can see that the instrument is linked to channel 1 of our mixer, but the kick pad is playing on mixer channel 2. This is because the small number at the top right of our FPC called output. If the number is 1 here, the pad associated will be played in the mixer channel 1 behind where we linked it in the first place. I'll link the FPC to channel 1 using Ctrl L here so you can see it better. If you want to divide your drums into different channels, like having your kick on 1, your first snare on 2, second snare on 3, and so on, you can do this by just changing the numbers correspondingly. This will allow you to have individual access for your kit. If you then link your individual tracks back into the first one, we can add some room using FL Studio's own reverb too. I'll usually pick the drum room preset as a base and work from there. I'll write in 2 small examples using what we've done now so you can hear the results. Here we can first hear that the samples switch between velocities. And here we can hear that it also switches samples on the same velocity. In this next clip I've made a small example of a prog metal type song so you can hear the drums in context with some more processing and effects. That was all for this tutorial. I would like to thank Impact Studios for having me check out their Impact Drums 1. If you liked the tutorial, please hit the like button below. If you want more tutorials, please let me know in the comments and subscribe for more content. Finally, I would like to thank you all for paying attention.